Hello, everyone. So this is Aquila for Aquilaastrology. I'm here with an amazing astrologer and an amazing friend. Her name is Amy. And today she's going to be discussing with us a lot about the Astro Hemispheres and how that can relate to your chart. She has an extensive background in this kind of practice, and I would really like to introduce you all to her. Amy, say hello.
Hi, everyone. Glad to be here today.
So, oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. Continue, Amy.
Oh, yeah, just excited to be here today. And thank you for the opportunity, Aquila.
So what are you going to be, explain to us hemispheres in the chart. How does that play out? What is this all about? Please give us your perspective.
Well, I think it would help to give you a little bit of background first. So my background is in psychotherapy, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. What's really interested me in the past 20 years of self-study with astrology is that we are connected to the universe through the stars and as above, so below. I'm a very spiritual person. I have a line up in the 8th house that could, point to that. But also what I'm connected to is the way that people and nature are connected. And so in addition to being a psychotherapist and to being interested and passionate about astrology, I'm also passionate and knowledgeable about shamanism and medicine, the wisdom, the medicine that we carry through our ancestors, as well as through our animal totems. So when we start talking about directions and hemispheres, all of that to me is connected into, if you will, like a circle of healing. So we look at directions and hemispheres. So there's the east, the west, the north, the south. And also in the Native American medicine wheel, there are the directions as well. And with astrology, even we look at it in kind of a circular, cyclical way. So just wanted to set that up first, is looking at directions and looking at different parts of the chart as quadrants, as being connected to the whole, connected to the astrological whole, and connected to nature as a whole as well.
Interesting. This is very interesting to me. I didn't know that you even had a background with the whole shamanism and learning all that. I didn't even know that goes into play with some of that. So can you explain to me and us, all of us, basically, so when you get a client, they're coming to you for a particular reason. What is it? How does the hemisphere come into play with all of this as well? How do you analyze this? What are the steps that you usually take when you get a client?
Yeah, so whenever I get a client and I'm reviewing their chart, that is one of the first things that I look at, is where are the majority of their placements of their planets in their chart? So are they lined up on the eastern side, right? On the left side of the chart, if I'm looking at it, or are they more on the western side? Do they have the majority of their planets in the top part of their chart or the bottom part of their chart? If I'm breaking it down just by east and west, east is going to tell me that this is a person who is more focused, more on themselves, more independent, more self-reliant, more connected to their internal and external world as it relates to themselves. They may not necessarily have as much focus on someone else. And when I look at the western side of the chart, if it's a majority of planets on that side, that tells me that they're somebody who are going to be more maybe more focused on relationships and other people, and can really anticipate the needs of other people and find a lot of satisfaction in helping or serving other people's experience. And that's not to say like East is like selfish and West is selfless. It's more just the internal focus on what is and what is guiding that particular personality, what is their central locus of control for what they're seeking in life. So it can give me a quick, really quick bird's eye view of where they're coming from and what they may be seeking.
And what would you say for a client that has more of a north south type of hemisphere? How does that work? Because then we're both putting in the aspects of east and west as well. So how does that work out in the equation?
Sure. So east and west is just kind of a really quick binary way to do it, because you're dividing the chart, halfway.
Okay.
But if I look at north and south, I mean, the first thing that occurs to me is this a daytime chart, right? Or is this a nighttime chart? So somebody who was born at nighttime and then has a majority of daytime planets, on the northern side of the chart might feel maybe like they don't quite belong, or that there's something incongruent with who they are and who the world is. So, and vice versa, somebody who was, born in the daytime and has all of their planets or the majority of their planets on the bottom of the chart, they can also feel maybe, not understandably to themselves, but kind of exposed or fearful, or, a little bit more like, why am I so afraid in the world? And it's like, well, because, you have this, you're a night, you're a daytime person living in a nighttime world, so those types of things help me to really, quickly get a view of what's happening on the inside of my client.
Interesting. So let's say I have a chart and a lot of the planets are on the right side or the left side of the chart, but there's probably like one or two planets, because that happens a lot. You do a chart, there's more focus, but there are these planets that are on the other end that are basically kind of shifting it as well. How does that work out internally for that person's energetic energy? Like, how does that come out? And I would also like you to go into more of a, because you're into the shamanism. I would also like you to get into the spiritual aspect as well, if that is something that you're inclined to do, just to get a feedback on this.
Sure. So the question was, nobody's chart is like a perfect example of everything in the East, that would be so simple, and it doesn't usually work that way. So if somebody has like, for example, I'll use myself as an example. That's an easy one. So if we were to throw up my chart, it would look like I have a lot of planets in the western side of my chart, but I do have Jupiter, for instance, in the 12th house, and squaring my Sagittarius planets, which I have quite a few of those. So the way that looks is I pull that energy in, the aspects, to say the planets on the western side of the chart, to see what energy that they're yielding. Maybe they're adding something to it. And for the clients who feel like, oftentimes people who have like a strong predominance of Western planets, they may feel like they've been struggling with codependence in their life, maybe some neediness, some difficulties to self-sustain themselves and their relationships, always feeling like they need someone else. I can pull in those planets and their particular story and mythology to help kind of balance out and say, yeah, I know it feels that way, and these are part of your patterns, but you also have this, and the eastern side of the chart that's yielding that, that antidote to being too focused on someone else, and bringing that back to yourself as having your own inner authority. So depending on what planets are at play, so in my case, Jupiter is a very large and benevolent planet.
Yes.
I mean, it's a big one. So that being said, I could say to myself, yes, you're very, you've had to do some work around codependence, which I have. I can anticipate people and their moods and get very, if I'm not watching it, I can become manipulative of wanting to fix, manage, and control their actions, because I'm so good at knowing what they're going to do, because I study and I observe them. So I would say, look, you have Jupiter and Pisces over here, and that's a very big planet on that side of the chart that's saying, in fact, you can, be very concerned with other people because it's in Pisces, and, there's a sense of oneness, but also that that's a lot of energy that you can give back to yourself, and it feels, for people who struggle with that or who have a lot of Western planets, it feels almost sacrilege to say you can give that much energy, a Jupiter amount of energy, back to yourself. And it becomes permission. So sometimes as astrologers, I think that people are looking for sometimes permission, like, hey, yeah, you can do that for yourself, especially if you have a lot of Western planets. It's hard to say, me too.
Interesting. So is there anything that you recommend for different planets that are on different sides? For example, the moon, what would you recommend to that client? Or you just mentioned Jupiter. Is there any other examples of a planet that you might be able to give to the client, or tools, managing tools for them to actually have that permission to balance that chart energy more so that's within themselves?
Yeah, I mean, without having really a concrete example, but for instance, I mentioned inner authority. And when we talk about authority, we talk oftentimes about Saturn. So say that somebody has, Saturn on the opposite side of the chart, the one that they're looking to balance out, right? So that might be a question of, where are you getting your authority? Are you under the thumb of somebody else's authority? How do you know when you're making the right decisions for yourself? Kind of turning back inwards. And again, giving permission, like you have the authority to build your own structures emotionally and physically in your life. So, and it could work, for instance, with the moon, it could work like, where are you getting your emotional sustenance? Is that coming from others, or is it, if it's primarily coming from yourself, are you closing out other people, right? Are you becoming so, self-focused that you're not letting others in or input in that could allow you to grow and change? So sometimes people with more, like, who have a heavier Eastern side, planetary lineup, can become, because they're so self-reliant and so independent, that they forget, like, oh yeah, I need outside input. I need input. I need something different than what I know in my own head to grow. So there's this dance that can happen with those inner, the interplay of, bringing in the antidote or something that's on the other side of the chart in, as like, this can help liberate you from sometimes feeling stuck in the way that we think, feel, believe, and behave, which we do. So we always have to kind of be like, what is the antidote? What can I, what am I not seeing here? Which is a great thing to do in astrology, is that you actually can see the chart. That's so cool. You can literally put it up and see. And remind yourself that, yes, there's an antidote, or there's an opposite view that can help for you emotionally.
Interesting. So how does this dynamic work in relationships with another person's energy coming into your chart that probably has an oppositional energy to your chart hemispheric energy? How does that work out for the person? Let's say they have, I don't know, you give examples, I guess, from your experience.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, so I think my personal viewpoint, for instance, Aquila, I know we had talked about tarot cards at
Yeah.
one. Yeah. And I was just so fascinated about the way that you use tarot and astrology. And so I hope I'm not getting into anything political when I say that I know some people, when they pick a card, a tarot card, and it's on the inverse or it's upside down, they read it a particular way. Like, oh, that's contrary, so I'm going to give that a particular meaning. And if it's right side up, then, you know, that has a different meaning. So what I'm speaking of here is that I don't do that. I don't do that. So I look at the cards. If I pull it upside down, I just turn it right back side up, because I just read one interpretation for the card, period. So I don't typically read the inverse.
Okay.
So same thing with astrology for me. So what I would typically do is, you were saying, what happens if your partner has an energy, you know, that they're bringing into your field that could be considered oppositional? I think that's what I heard you say. You know, how do we integrate? How do we interplay that? And to that question, I would say, when you start talking about relationships, for instance, bringing somebody else into your life and vice versa, the quadrant that I typically look at is the 7th, 8th, and 9th, you know, houses. Not just saying that whatever couple, what planets do they have in those houses, but the purpose of, you know, thinking of it in terms of that is that for any relationship, you have to have passion, intimacy, and commitment. If we're talking about long-term relationships, I mean, we can have relationships that last 2 weeks, we can have relationships that last 2 months. You know, that's true too. But you know, most of us, when we are falling in love or you know, embarking on something where we're going to get attached to someone, we are typically looking for long-term maintenance of love. And so I don't necessarily think that somebody bringing in something, you know, squaring or in opposition or even in conjunct is so much the focus as, you know, where are the planets that are indicating your passion, and what are those energies looking like? What are the planets that are indicating your intimacy, and what is that looking like? And also for your commitment, because you're going to need all three to be able to ultimately sustain something that's considered to be friendly enough, you know, intimate enough, and committed enough in a team spirit sort of way to go the long haul. And so that's usually the lens that I look at. If a couple doesn't have, like, say, enough passion indicated through their chart, then I know that they may be at risk for what would be considered companionate love, which they can really get along like friends, and they can talk about almost anything. They can commit, but they're missing that spark. And so it can kind of have like almost a brother-sister feel, or like a, you know, like an old married couple when they could be in their 30s, you know. So there's that. And then and when I'm talking about this, I'm actually relating it to the psychodynamic model that I use for Sternberg's triangular theory of love. And, you know, if you look that up, it's kind of interesting. It's a little archaic, you know, it was from the 80s, but I think it still stands today. And his particular theory was that, yeah, we need passion, intimacy, and commitment in order to survive, and what he would call consummate love, you know, to have all three components. Otherwise, if we're mix matching just passion and intimacy without commitment, we're going to burn out. We're going to have like a celebrity marriage,
Gotcha.
you know, where we're really, you know, excited, but we don't really have anything to keep it going. So where I talk about passion and intimacy and commitment, passion is Libra, intimacy is Scorpio, and commitment is Sagittarius, is how I look at it. So people don't necessarily have to have, you know, planets or anything happening in 7th, 8th, and 9th. That's sort of symbolic, but also if they do, I mean, certainly I'm looking at the aspects in the 7th, 8th, and 9th houses, because I think that's where my eye tends to go. You know, when I'm first, you know, dealing with any couples issues or looking at what their charts are doing, that's where I go first, to the 3rd quadrant.
Now, what about those people that just have energy everywhere? You know, it's flat out everywhere, and it's just, what is that about? How does that person's energy vibrate internally and then externally in this physical world?
Are you mentioning, I mean, I know this type of person that you're talking about. Whoa, you know, like I fully understand what you're saying energetically.
Yes.
I'm also wondering, intellectually, are you talking about somebody who has planets in all different parts of their chart? No. Yes?
Yeah, somebody that their planets, you know, there's one planet in the 5th, another planet in the 11th, another, you know, what about those kind of energetic things? Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I mean, in general, I would think, or when I see that, I think that those people have a little bit more of a balance going on. They may not feel as extreme in themselves. Typically, people who are lined up on one side of the chart or the other, you know, in either way, they feel very much like oftentimes it's black or white. You know, the thinking can be very black or white. Whereas those people who have more of a smattering, or, you know, maybe a balance between the sides, I tend to see more of like, you know, I can talk to them about the nuance and the gray. They're a little bit more, I'm not saying one is better than the other. Sometimes people who are too focused in the gray or the middle way, they don't have that grit or that necessarily that, you know, passion to keep it going, or to, you know, self-motivate as well. Versus someone who tends to live in emotional extremes. They can be very, you know, passionate and get stuff done. So it's not one is better than the other. It just kind of gives me a quick bird's eye view of energetically what's happening with my client. And of course, you know, as all of this, you know, that's my first, you know, viewpoint. But studying the chart, looking more deeply at aspects, you know, how the sun, the moon, the rising sign, those are things I generally look at first. How they're interplaying, you know, how the inner planets are interplaying with the outer planets. I know that some astrologers don't even look at outer planets. Yeah, which is really interesting to me. But I do. And so those, you know, I think that it just depends on somebody's, you know, their story. I have to hear a little bit about their background. You know, it's as Mark Jones says, it's, you know, the chart is really important, but talking to your client is the most important. That's the most important thing in the room. The chart is, you know, there to help you as a tool, but the person that you're talking to is your primary focus.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
Completely agree with that, because you do have to understand how they're using that energy as well in their life to actually assist them in this process that they're in. So we're going to be winding down a little bit. And I just really, I thank you so much for taking time out and coming and talking about this, because this is something that's very interesting to me and you as well, with your practice and your background and your experience. So one more question though. Does elements play a big part in the hemispheres as well in the chart?
Great question. And I love the elements. Oh, that's very much connected to my shamanistic and interest, in the medicine wheel. And also, elementally. So earth, fire, air, water, I definitely look at that. I don't know if I look at it, independent from the hemispheres, but I certainly am, the first thing I look at is this is this predominantly a water person? Is this predominantly, does this person have a lot of elements stacked up in one way that will definitely inform me about their personality and how they might view the world, and also how they, what they might be seeking, like I said, the antidote, So for instance, I myself have 0 earth in my chart, right? So zero. I mean, it's abysmal. And, and I've often admired and even envied people who have earth in their chart. You can really see it. They seem so at home, with cutting vegetables and, and I'm more like I'm cutting myself on accident anytime I pick up a knife, or I'm like cutting a vegetable. It's like a horror show.
You're also a Sagittarius, so you're kind of prone to being a little bit clumsy.
Right. And in the kitchen is just all wrong. I'm like, I need to be out, in front of a fire somewhere cooking up my victuals. Right. But, that being said, it's like for me, right? So I have to think, what is kind of earthy, what grounds me, what helps me? Like sometimes that's holding gemstones and meditating, which is the hardest thing, but oftentimes the best thing. And, just getting my feet dirty, getting the, in the sand, outside, whatever it is to kind of the antidote, right, to whatever it is that I have so much water, right, and fire personally in my chart that I need to be grounded. So I look elementally at those things to say, what are your strengths? First of all, what do you have like going on that's like a gift that's so cool? For me, it's a lot of fire and water. Some people would say, oh, that sounds like, not like congruent. And I will say, yes, I do live at extremes oftentimes, and I have to cultivate the middle way, which has been my antidote, right? But also, some people, have, some people look at that as not necessarily a positive thing. I see it as steam. So it can be like energetic, but I have to channel it. So I certainly do look at elements, and I really appreciate what they offer to the chart as a whole.
Amy, wow, thank you so much for your time and energy. So please tell everyone how they can contact you and how they can reach you for astrology reading or anything else regarding even your personal background, your professional background. Tell us where to find you, Amy.
Sure. So you can find me, or if you want to call me directly, that's, or text, people can do that. My number is 630-442-3966. Also, you can look me up. I don't have my webpage yet developed. I will. But if you wanted to look up my Psychology Today profile online, that's my therapy profile. That's at psychologytoday.com. Amy Mckeever, Mckeee, V as in Victor, ER. And if you want to just shoot me an email, feel free to do so at Amy. So it's Amy at butterflymedicinecounseling.com.
Oh, I love that, butterfly medicine. I've never heard that before. That's really unique.
Yes, yes.
Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for coming. Thank you all for watching and giving us your time and energy in this amazing subject of hemispheres, elements, and even shamanism in the chart. Thank you, Amy, again. And we'll see you guys another time. All right. Bye. Say hello. Say bye, Amy.